win for Donald Trump, saying he can move forward with that executive order that he issued on day one, changing the definition of citizenship in this country. Well, this was a big surprise, Whit.
The Supreme Court slammed Democrats with ruthless decisions to block emergency SNAP funding and give Trump free rein to purge Democrats from federal commissions. Not only that, they are upholding state bans on transgender health care for minors and handing states power to redraw maps, all of which cost Democrats up to 19 House seats. Each ruling hit like a hammer, shredding checks and balances and leaving the party reeling in shock.
This morning, the Supreme Court has delivered a monumental victory for the Constitution, the separation of powers, and the rule of law.
2025 seems like a full-blown power shift. The conservative majority on the court is redrawing the map of how power works in America, and Democrats are scrambling, panicking, warning the public that this isn't normal.
But now, in a 6-3 split, the conservative majority ruled that President Trump can move forward with implementing his birthright citizenship change.
The Supreme Court ruled that lower courts can no longer easily block executive actions while they're being appealed. That might sound technical, but it's actually massive. For decades, the ability to issue injunctions was one of the only tools lower courts had to stop a president from overreaching. Without it, the executive branch gets to act first and fight about legality later. In real time, that means the president can move fast, aggressively, and with far fewer obstacles.
Well, this was a big surprise, Whit, and this is coming from the youngest conservative justice on the Supreme Court, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, 6-3, as you said, in a big win for Donald Trump, saying he can move forward with that executive order that he issued on day one.
Schumer didn't even try to hide his fear. He called it a grave danger to our democracy, a blank check for Trump, and even the death of judicial oversight. And this wasn't political theater. This was the Senate Majority Leader practically warning the country that the presidency had just been turbocharged. Legal analysts across the spectrum were saying it too. This ruling brings the unitary executive theory roaring back to life. That theory argues the president should have sweeping, centralized power, something conservatives have been pushing for years. And with this decision, the court basically handed Trump more immediate authority than any president has had in decades.
If that mechanism is available, whether one way or another, doesn't that solve a large part of the problem?
Conservatives celebrated it like a long overdue correction, saying the courts had been overstepping for years. But liberals saw something darker. A judiciary removing guardrails at the exact time the presidency is being reshaped by a man who thrives on blunt force political moves.
President Trump is responding to the U.S. Supreme Court's landmark decision to not allow federal district courts to block his executive orders.
The landmark 6-3 decision today out of the Supreme Court allowing President Trump to move forward, for now, with plans to end birthright citizenship.
And when you put these rulings side by side with the shutdown chaos, the snap freeze, and Trump's increasingly aggressive push for expanded executive control, one pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The Supreme Court is no longer just ruling on cases. It's sculpting the political battlefield.
Changing the definition of citizenship in this country. Practically speaking, it means the president can, in the next 30 days, begin to develop guidelines for how he would implement that.
Every decision is landing in Trump's favor. Every limitation is hitting Democrats where it hurts most. So when Schumer stands there, stunned, calling this a constitutional turning point, it's not exaggeration. It's not drama. It's the sound of a political leader watching institutional power tilt in real time and knowing he has no mechanism left to stop it.
President celebrating a victory over federal judges who have blocked key portions of his agenda this year.
This was a
You can practically hear the tension when Chuck Schumer steps up to a podium. He knows exactly what's happening. These decisions aren't random. They're landing at the exact moment the government is shut down. Trump is pushing for expanded authority, and the political temperature in America is already boiling. And the worst part for Democrats is simple. Every single ruling seems to tilt the scales in Trump's favor. And if you think that was a deal breaker, the next court ruling is much more brutal than you can imagine. It was the snap ruling, the one that quietly set the tone for everything that came after.
Tens of millions of Americans remain in limbo as this administration continues its crusade against SNAP.
During the shutdown, when 42 million Americans were relying on SNAP benefits to feed their families, a lower court tried to force Trump to unlock emergency funds so people wouldn't go hungry. But the Supreme Court stepped in and blocked that order. Not permanently, just long enough to freeze everything and push the crisis back on Congress. Overnight, food insecurity turned into political ammunition. Schumer accused Trump of weaponizing hunger, saying families were being punished for political leverage.
Order, which liberal justices believe violates the 14th Amendment.
The government has no incentive to bring this case to the Supreme Court because it's not really losing anything.
But Trump flipped the narrative in one sentence. The money comes after Democrats reopen the government. And suddenly the media wasn't talking about Trump anymore. They were talking about whether Democrats had miscalculated, whether their shutdown strategy had backfired, whether they were the ones leaving millions of families in limbo.
On Friday, the Senate voting down a proposal that would block further strikes on Iran without congressional approval. The Trump administration now reportedly considering offering Iran the chance to build a civilian.
And that's when people realized the court wasn't just refereeing the shutdown, it was shaping the politics of it. It was the first moment where you could feel something shifting, almost like the court was quietly signaling which side it thought had the stronger constitutional footing. But the ruling that truly broke Schumer, the one that made him look like he had just watched a fire start in a dry forest, came right after. And this time, it wasn't about food assistance or funding or temporary orders. It was about something far bigger: power. If you've made it this far, consider subscribing to the channel to get more updates.
Majority saying that this exceeded authority. The question is, how will they thread this needle? How will they limit the district courts
Jonathan, let me just
in
interrupt
going
you.
forward?
And the scariest part for Democrats is that this is only the beginning. More rulings are coming, more institutions are at stake, and if the pattern holds, the political storm raging through 2025 is about to get a lot more violent. It only gets wilder from here, because right when Democrats are still reeling from the shutdown chaos and the executive power earthquake, the Supreme Court drops another ruling that feels like someone just handed Trump a golden pair of scissors labeled "Cut anyone who annoys you." And yes, he wasted zero time smiling about it.
That was meant for the babies of slaves. It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation.
The legal fight over that ban now expected to work its way back through the lower courts.
Right after handing Trump the ability to sweep Democrats out of federal offices like dust on a countertop, the justices pivoted straight into the cultural battlefield, this time with a ruling that shook LGBTQ+ advocates across the country.
On the chance to build a civilian nuclear program in up to $30 billion in previously frozen assets if the regime agrees to halt uranium enrichment, according to 3 sources familiar with the discussions. The president overnight.
In another 6-3 opinion, the court upheld state bans on transgender treatment for minors, instantly turning it into one of the most explosive cultural victories Republicans have had in years. Conservatives spent the day celebrating it as a massive win for parental rights, religious freedom, and protecting kids. Schumer came out with steam practically rising from his head. He blasted the decision as part of a coordinated GOP effort to strip healthcare access from millions under the guise of protecting children, and Democrats echoed that warning. They said the ruling wasn't just about minors. It was a doorway, a legal precedent that could allow future restrictions on adult LGBTQ+ healthcare too.
Protect its industry against, quote, unjust U.S. tariffs. In that July 9th deadline that the president has long asserted he would place tariffs on other.
To Republicans, the ruling was a triumph. To Democrats, it was a warning shot aimed at the broader future of civil rights. And to the rest of America, it felt like another sign that the Supreme Court wasn't just deciding cases, it was picking sides in the culture war. But the court still had one more earthquake ready to shake the political landscape, and honestly, this one hit so hard that even analysts were stunned. Because overnight, the Supreme Court changed not just one law, but the entire shape of the House of Representatives.
A little unclear what happened there. I do think what you see here going on is something that has been happening within the Democratic Party for these 9+ months of the Trump presidency.
In another high-stakes decision, the court handed states more power to redraw their political maps, weakening long-standing Voting Rights Act protections that had been guarding against gerrymandering for decades. Suddenly, analysts were predicting that Democrats could lose up to 19 seats in the House.
The chance to build a civilian nuclear program and up to $30 billion in previously frozen assets.
That's not a bad night. That's a political demolition. That's a whole election cycle turned upside down. And in a country as evenly divided as America, losing 19 seats isn't just a setback. It's a lockout. Analysts started warning that this one ruling could prevent Democrats from winning House control for years, not one election year.
Not what is going on. It is a divide between people who see this as needing to fight, and having a posture of fighting, and fighting Trump and fighting for something, and those who...
Schumer came out swinging again, calling it a direct attack on democracy and a deliberate attempt to tilt the power structure toward Republicans for years to come. He said the quiet part out loud. This ruling was power. And the court had handed the pen to the GOP and redrawn America. And with that, the political landscape of 2025 was completely reshaped. Trump gained the ability to purge Democrats from agencies. Republicans gained a cultural victory on transgender health care. And conservative-led states gained the power to redraw maps that could secure Republican dominance for an entire generation. One ruling after another, the court was rewriting the balance. And Democrats, watching these decisions drop like falling anvils, felt the walls closing in. Because if the court keeps ruling like this, then 2025 isn't just a chaotic year. It's the year the balance of American power snapped in half.